Rafael Trujillo ruled the Dominican Republic with absolute power. He demanded loyalty, crushed opposition, and built an empire of fear. But no dictator is untouchable. In this video, you will learn about the early life of one of Latin America's most feared dictators, his rise to power, and the events that led to his assassination. Go back in time to understand the history that shaped the Dominican Republic. Imagine a nation standing at a crossroads, its fate teetering between hope and uncertainty. The year is 1924. After years under American occupation, the Dominican Republic is finally free, eager to carve out its own destiny. But independence comes with its own set of challenges. Enter President Horacio Vazquez, a seasoned politician tasked with leading a country that had been reshaped by foreign hands. The occupation had brought development, new roads, bustling ports, and a booming sugar industry. Yet, beneath this facade of progress lay a deeper truth. The nation's economy was now heavily reliant on American control, particularly in the sugar sector. Sugar was both a blessing and a curse. It generated wealth, but it also left the country vulnerable, its prosperity dictated by an unpredictable global market. Thousands of Dominican workers found themselves at the mercy of forces far beyond their control. Meanwhile, political stability remained elusive. The withdrawal of American forces created a power vacuum, leaving traditional structures in disarray. Rival factions battled for dominance, each vying for control in a rapidly shifting landscape. The stage was set for upheaval, and then, from the shadows of uncertainty, a figure began to emerge. A man whose name would become synonymous with power and fear. A man who would reshape the Dominican Republic in his own image. Who was Rafael Trujillo? What forces shaped him? And how did he transform from a young boy in San Cristobal into one of the most ruthless dictators of the 20th century? This is the story of his rise, a tale of ambition, manipulation, and relentless pursuit of power. To understand the dictator, we must first understand the boy. Let's step back in time and uncover the origins of El Jefe. Power, control, fear. The name Rafael Trujillo still sends shivers down the spine of those who lived under his rule. But how did a boy born in a small Dominican town rise to become one of the most feared dictators of the 20th century? In the town of San Cristobal, deep in the heart of the Dominican Republic, a child was born on October 24, 1891. His name was Rafael Leonidas Trujillo Molina, the third of 11 children in a modest family. His beginnings were ordinary, therefore, few could have predicted the dark legacy he would leave behind. Trujillo attended local schools, but, like many of his peers, left formal education early. He found work in the sugar industry, which dominated the Dominican economy. But cutting cane in the sweltering heat was not the future he envisioned for himself. Therefore, he sought power wherever he could find it. He turned to crime, joining gangs known for stealing cattle and engaging in illicit activities. These early experiences taught him a valuable lesson. In a world dictated by strength and cunning, bending the rules was sometimes necessary. But fate had something else in store for him. The American occupation of the Dominican Republic brought sweeping changes. One of the most significant was the creation of the National Guard in 1917, a force meant to bring order to the country. Therefore, it became a golden opportunity for ambitious young men looking to climb the social and military ladder. In 1918, thanks to his employer and family connections, Trujillo secured a position in the National Guard. Major James J. McLean, a friend of Trujillo's uncle, played a crucial role in his recruitment. His sharp mind and unwavering dedication quickly caught the attention of U.S. Marine officer Richard Malcolm Cutts. But Trujillo was not content with merely following orders. He had his eyes set on something much greater. His rise through the ranks was swift. By 1919, he was promoted to second lieutenant, training extensively with the U.S. Marines. By 1922, he commanded the National Guard's 10th Company in San Francisco de Macorís. His superiors praised his discipline and tactical mind, and by 1923, He had secured the rank of major, overseeing the 1st Military District. His rapid ascent was no coincidence. The Dominican military was still in its infancy, therefore, it was an environment ripe for someone with ambition and an unrelenting drive for power. Trujillo recognized that the instability caused by the American occupation was his opportunity to make a name for himself. But merely climbing the ranks of the military was not enough for him. As the Dominican Republic struggled to rebuild its military, Trujillo was already plotting his next move. He had secured power within the ranks. Therefore, he began envisioning a path to even greater control. But to achieve his ultimate goal, he would need more than military prowess. He would need absolute domination. So how did a young officer once entangled in petty crime transform into one of the most ruthless dictators of the 20th century? The answer lies in his ability to seize opportunities, manipulate those around him, and crush anyone who stood in his way. His rise was only just beginning. The Dominican Republic in the late 1920s was a nation standing on the edge of transformation. Political unrest gripped the country, creating a perfect storm for someone to seize power. Therefore, while chaos reigned, one man saw an opportunity. A man who had been waiting in the shadows, orchestrating his rise with patience and precision, Rafael Leonidas Trujillo. President Horacio Vázquez was struggling to maintain control. Economic hardships had weakened his grip on the nation. But where others saw instability, Trujillo saw a chance to cement his influence. He aligned himself with a prominent political figure, Rafael Estrella Ureña, a man eager to overthrow the failing president. Estrella Ureña needed military support to ensure his success. Therefore, he turned to Trujillo, the rising commander within the Dominican military. They struck a deal. Trujillo would ensure the army remained neutral during the uprising, but in return, he would secure his own path to power. On March 3, 1930, Estrella Ureña declared himself acting president, and Trujillo was named head of both the police and the army. Trujillo, now the most powerful man in the military, became the presidential nominee of the newly formed Patriotic Coalition of Citizens. But he had no intention of playing fair. Trujillo wielded his military influence to crush his political opposition. Rival candidates faced relentless harassment and intimidation. The presence of armed soldiers at polling stations sent a clear message: Trujillo was the only choice. But his rise to power wasn't just political manipulation. It was a calculated conquest. When the election results came in, Trujillo secured a staggering 99% of the vote. With this, his grip on the country was solidified.
Picturesque Trujillo City, capital of the Dominican Republic, one of the first Western allies to join the cause of the United Nations, turns out for the inauguration of the president for whom the city is named. From the ancient Spanish fortress, built more than 400 years ago, comes the car of Rafael Trujillo Molina. General Trujillo is the strong man of the Republic.
But this was just the beginning of his transformation of the Dominican Republic. 2.5 weeks after he took office, disaster struck. Hurricane San Zenon tore through Santo Domingo, killing over 2,000 people and leaving the capital in ruins. With the city in crisis, Trujillo took advantage of the devastation. He declared martial law and launched a massive rebuilding campaign. But his response was not just about reconstruction, it was about solidifying his legacy. Trujillo used the disaster to reshape the nation in his image, renaming the capital Ciudad Trujillo, embedding himself into the identity of the country. Streets, monuments, and public buildings were dedicated in his honor, and with every passing day, his grip on power tightened, and his rule became more oppressive. The Dominican Republic had survived the storm, but a new one was brewing. Trujillo had seized power, manipulated an election, and used a natural disaster to entrench himself as the supreme ruler. His cult of personality grew, overshadowing every aspect of Dominican life. But what was life like under his reign? How did his dictatorship shape the daily lives of Dominicans? And what scars did it leave behind? Power can shape nations, but it can also destroy them. Under the iron fist of Rafael Trujillo, the Dominican Republic underwent a transformation like no other. His rule brought economic progress. Therefore, his supporters hailed him as the nation's savior. But beneath the surface of modernization lurked a regime built on fear, violence, and absolute control. In 1937, Trujillo ordered one of the most horrifying massacres in Caribbean history, the Parsley Massacre. He justified it by claiming Haiti was harboring his enemies, unleashing a brutal purge along the border, instructing Dominican soldiers to slaughter Haitian men, women, and children. But this was no conventional execution. Trujillo devised a cruel test. Victims were forced to pronounce the word parsley. Those who struggled with the Spanish pronunciation were immediately condemned. As a result, thousands were executed with machetes, their bodies discarded in mass graves or thrown into the sea at Monte Cristi. But while the massacre drew international outrage, justice was elusive. Washington pressured Trujillo into paying reparations. However, only a fraction of the promised compensation ever reached the survivors. Despite his brutality, Trujillo knew that power was not sustained by violence alone. Trujillo sought complete economic control. Therefore, he ended U.S. financial governance with the whole Trujillo Treaty, securing control over customs revenues and launching a massive propaganda campaign that glorified his leadership. But economic strength did not mean prosperity for all. While the country modernized, Trujillo amassed unimaginable wealth, exploiting industries and siphoning resources for his personal gain. His relationship with the United States remained strategically beneficial. Despite tensions over trade policies, Trujillo maintained a facade of cooperation with Washington, ensuring continued American investment. But as his greed and oppression deepened, the illusion of stability began to crack. The Dominican people lived under his shadow. Streets bore his name, statues loomed in every city, and his face was unavoidable. Fear became a part of daily life, where silence was survival. But even in the darkest moments of his rule, resistance was growing. Trujillo's grip tightened, but resistance strengthened. His brutality had long kept his enemies in check. Therefore, he underestimated the power of the people. But every dictatorship has an expiration date. What led to the final years of his reign? And how did the Dominican Republic finally break free from his suffocating rule? For decades, Rafael Trujillo was hailed as a savior, a godlike figure to the Dominican people. His grandiose public works and staunch anti-communist stance won him favor with both his nation and the United States. But beneath this facade of prosperity and loyalty, a series of events began to unravel the illusion, exposing the true nature of his regime. The first crack in Trujillo's veneer of invincibility came with the disappearance of Jesus de Galindez on March 12, 1956. Galindez, a Spanish politician, writer, and Columbia University professor, was working on a report that would expose the dark truths of Trujillo's rule. On a cold night in New York City, Galindez was allegedly kidnapped and murdered by Trujillo's intelligence operatives. This brazen act of international abduction and murder sent shockwaves through the global community. It marked the beginning of a shift in perception, as people started to see Trujillo not as a benevolent leader, but as a ruthless dictator willing to silence any opposition. Trujillo's obsession with maintaining control extended beyond his borders. He expressed great contempt for Venezuela's president, Romulo Betancourt, a staunch opponent of his regime. On June 24, 1960, Trujillo's agents planted a bomb in Betancourt's car, attempting to assassinate him. Though Betancourt survived, the attempt on his life ignited international outrage. The Betancourt incident was a tipping point. Outraged, the Organization of American States unanimously voted to sever diplomatic relations with Trujillo's government and imposed economic sanctions on the Dominican Republic. Trujillo's actions had isolated him on the world stage, but his most heinous act was yet to come. The final blow to Trujillo's crumbling image was the assassination of the Mirabal sisters on November 25, 1960. Patria, Minerva, and Maria Teresa Mirabal were vocal opponents of Trujillo, involved in clandestine activities against his regime. Their brutal murder sparked outrage and galvanized the Dominican people. The deaths of the Mirabal sisters became a rallying cry for resistance. The Dominican people, now fully aware of Trujillo's brutality, began to organize and plot against him. The global community, too, had had enough of his tyranny. With the world and his own people turning against him, Trujillo's days were numbered. But how did this once untouchable dictator meet his end? What were the final moments leading up to Rafael Trujillo's assassination? A warm night in the Dominican Republic, May 30th, 1961. Rafael Trujillo, a man who ruled with absolute power for over 3 decades, was about to take his last breath. For years, his reign had been built on fear and brutality, many believing he was untouchable. But on this fateful night, his enemies were ready to strike. A group of determined conspirators, General Juan Tomás Díaz, General Antonio Imbert Barrera, Amado Garcia Guerrero, Antonio de la Maza, Roberto Pastoriza, Salvador Estrella Sadala, and Pedro Livio Cedeño had one mission: assassinate the dictator and liberate their nation from his grip. They set a trap along a lonely stretch of road near San Cristobal. But even the most carefully laid plans can unravel in the chaos of the moment. As Trujillo's car approached, the assassins opened fire, bringing his reign of terror to an end in a matter of seconds. But victory was far from secured. The conspirators had eliminated Trujillo. They expected swift action to seize control. But General José René Román Fernández, known as Pupo Román, failed to act on the contingency plans. The lack of leadership created a dangerous vacuum. Therefore, the feared intelligence agency, the SIM, led by Johnny Abbes and Roberto Figueroa Cerillon, retaliated with brutal force. But the resistance had already been set in motion. Trujillo's son, Ramfis Trujillo, returned from Paris to avenge his father. He ordered a merciless crackdown. On November 18, 1961, 6 of the main conspirators were executed in what became known as the Hacienda Maria massacre. But 2 men, Antonio Imbert Barrera and Luis Amiyama Tio, managed to escape, keeping the hope of rebellion alive. Trujillo's funeral was a grand affair. Therefore, his supporters attempted to cement his legacy. But his empire was already crumbling. President Joaquín Balaguer, once a loyalist, recognized the shifting tide and maneuvered to distance himself from the regime. Ultimately, Balaguer allowed Ramfis to leave the country, ensuring that the Trujillo era was over. The assassination of Rafael Trujillo marked the end of an era. The Dominican Republic could begin to rebuild, but his fall did not bring immediate peace. What followed were years of political turmoil and foreign intervention, as the nation struggled to find its footing in the wake of his dictatorship. If you found value in this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and watch these videos right here.